Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. We are continuing our read and commentary of the Nag Hammadi library, and we are on the third text of the sixth Codex. We just completed the book titled Thunder, the Perfect Mind. And the main point or takeaway from that text is this idea about Sophia being expressed into the conomic realm from the pleroma, her higher self, into the imperfect lower self, not from a top-down way, but from a ground-upward way, with the intention of ascension and transcendency, but not that the Father-Mother looks on high from an authoritarian position, but rather allows each one of us to have a authoritative discourse with self through the process of experiencing duality. Now that is really the point of the Thunder Perfect Mind, really is to come to a pure understanding of who self is through having the allowance by the Mother and Father to experience opposites. Not that we look at those as right or wrong, but rather we look at those as we would look at any laws of physics, merely metaphysical understanding or hermetical understanding of the so-called logos of the universe, the way it operates. And it operates off the principle of opposites. Now, in the pleromic realm, everything is full and there are no opposites. There's only emanation. But in this realm, there is what's called creation. And creation comes about when you bring about an amalgamation of opposites to different degrees. And that really is where we arrive at the perfect mind, because when these two are brought together, thunder comes about. When we have illumination, then thunder follows. And the thunder will follow as far away from the lightning as it is close to the lightning. And we have that sort of epiphany. It's almost as though thunder is striking on our minds. I remember I put my keys. That kind of moment. That's the perfect mind. The perfect mind that is in tune with self. And that brings us into the next text, which many scholars might believe doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason. But I differ and disagree with that. This is actual follow-up from the perfect mind. Sophia allows us to have allowance. She's not judging us, but merely logos is set into motion. No differently than if we were to put our hands on ice, we would experience a burning sensation, or we put our hands on fire and experience a burning sensation, albeit different sensations of pain. There is no moral understanding of that. Morality is merely different tribes of people and different people coming up with their idea about how they think they should live and others should also live. But in the world of Sophia, there is only allowance. There is no should. Everything is permissible, as Paul says, but not all things are prudent. That's why Christ talks about not judging, because there's nothing to judge. This is all just is compared to the is not. And where they clash is what's called the confronting, as we have learned, Agnostus the Blessed. And so what follows here is what's called the authoritative discourse. And that authoritative discourse is brought about through the radar system that I often aptly talk about on this channel, which is the authoritative voice. The radar system being that dish that picks up the signals from the spiritual realm and then translates that to the physical body to take forth some kind of action. And the more we are in alignment with sort of that FM radio, say the station's 98, maybe we're 98 where another person's 94, the more we're going to have a clear reception and get that exact song that we're wanting to hear. We're going to be playing our tune, if you will, our song. This is that thing called the authoritative voice. Now, we will be distracted. This idea that there's left and right. There is no left or right. It's a continuum. It's all the same experience. But our mind perceives it as though it were opposites, in order that we may create for ourselves this illusion called self, and whatever we've brought ourselves here to experience and to accomplish, our message or mission, to be one more shard of light that liberates humanity from darkness and helps them to continually have an ever-increasing ascendancy toward gnosis through wisdom. So, the key we want to understand, transition between the previous text and this text, is the difference between Sophia and the Jehovah God. Because if you're not careful, if you read that last text, you'll come to believe Sophia is instructing you on some moral code and you have to follow me, and if you don't, I'm going to met retribution on you. She's not judging you. She is bringing forth logos, the logic of this realm. So that we all have a kind of consequence, not through a moral code, but rather through understanding the interplay of dark and light, the so-called tree of knowledge of good and evil. And once we have access to that tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the more we have Gnostic moments and live through wisdom, the more our soul can learn through this understanding that we transcend this idea of left and right, black and white, good and evil, so forth and so on. But they're all just different aspects of the universe. You can think of them as different parts of a recipe, ingredients that are at our disposal. We're cooking up different kinds of dishes, each one of us, or maybe a palette full of different myriads of colors, and everybody's painting a different picture with different colors. And the more we're in tune with our mission, the more we're going to get that picture right, the more right as in what's right for us, not by what other people think. But again, going back to the connection between the previous book or the text and this text is that Sophia provides allowance through what was provided to her by the father and mother to experience for herself what it is to be like the father and mother, which is to be utterly alone, to have to discover for oneself and to emanate for oneself whatever reality one is wanting to emanate. But through that process, there's pain. But there's also glory. And the difference between that versus the Jehovah God is a very slight difference. One is authoritative, the other is authoritarian. Now, the authoritarian would damn you to hell, literally, or destroy you on the spot, or set forth all of these so-called spiritual laws to bar you from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That Jehovah God will have power over you because it needs you in order to drink off of your so-called creative juices, to maintain power and control over you. It uses that power and control to amass greedily for itself whatever it's wanting to amass and build for itself, because it can't do it without you, or at least that's what it imagined. This is what a lot of people imagine, and so most people think that way. They don't think for themselves. They look to leaders, they look to masters, they look to authoritarian leaders. That's what they're looking for, to tell them what's right and what's wrong. And they personally allow themselves to be punished if they step out of line. Rather, they prefer others to be punished, and their set of actions or behaviors is just sort of looked over glibly and glossily, right? That it's okay, because after all, I go to church and the Father forgives me. So this is the difference, just simply 3 to 5 letters, authoritative versus authoritarian. Jehovah God would not permit you to have access and would punish you if you try to have access to these hermetical principles and getting in touch with your soul and accomplishing your mission. He would have you line up the demiurge with its predetermined way that things have to be or else. Whereas Sophia would simply allow you to experience for yourself, and you will be able, through gnosis and wisdom, use the different things you need to use to create whatever you're creating. But you don't need morality to be a good person. It's already there within you, telling you that if you go and harm others, that same thing will come back to you in some form or another, so forth and so on. So you just only need to ask yourself if that's what you want somewhere down the way. All right, so let's go into this book as we normally do, and we're first going to go to Wikipedia to read up about this book, and it will give us a secular understanding of what they think the book is trying to tell us. And then we'll go into the etymology of the word authority. Look at the difference between authoritative versus authoritarian, because this is so central to understanding this book and the book prior. Now, it says here, authoritative discourse, sometimes called authoritative teaching, is a text about the journey of the soul. It is the third of 8 treatises in Codex VI of the Nag Hammadi library text, taking up pages 22-35 of the Codex's 78 pages. The text uses metaphors extensively to describe the origin, condition, and ultimate destiny of the soul. Now, this is this writer's understanding of what's being said. You want to keep that in mind. It's not authoritative, it's just merely their understanding. So destiny, don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Everybody has free will, and so we can map out for ourselves. Now, what's destined is the seed that Father has, you've been brought here to accomplish. That is within you. You can't control that. That seed within you, the accomplishment, the mission. But how you go about to carry that forth, and how many lifetimes, how much suffering, or whatever, that's up to you. Calling the soul a prostitute. So this is very similar to another book, right, that we have read before in the Nag Hammadi library. So it was under Codex II, the exegesis on the soul, right? If you want to go back and watch that one, that would give you even a deeper understanding of the way Gnostics understand the purpose of the soul. And that's what we're having here, is further explication on an explanation about what the soul is. its purpose, and how we might get in touch with it. It's so essential for us to be able to maneuver that radar dish around into the sky to get the proper coordinates, right, for ourselves. And everybody's coordinates are going to be different. How do we listen to the Spirit? How do we listen to that inner voice? This is what this book is about. As is, well, the Thunder, Perfect Mind, is telling you about the world outside, the spiritual world, physical world outside in this universe, and everything in a hermetical, metaphysical way that exists out there that is available to you. And that soup of life that you take different, or palettes of paint, those analogies we use, or different ingredients, that's the universe for you. The authoritative teaching is going to focus on, now that you understand that, how do I then take the soul or that radar dish and tune into the proper coordinates and proper being, what's proper to you, not to anyone else. How do I do that? How do I tune into the spiritual self? Or how do I not stray from that exact coordinate that's perfectly right for me? Okay, so that's what this book is really talking about here. Let's go ahead and go back where it continues in Wikipedia. The exegesis on the soul also compared the soul to being female and a prostitute, and that how we tend to prostitute ourselves out to the world, whether it be the right-hand path that tells us we're supposed to follow a certain authoritarian voice or else, or the left-hand path where we have no logic. We just blindly and recklessly just follow our lust, and then we get the consequences of that. Calling the soul a prostitute, a seed of wheat, a contestant, an invalid, a fish, and a bride. It is really heavily metaphorical exposition of the origin, condition, and ultimate, what's going to ultimately become the soul as well. And you get a little bit of that from the Secret Book of John as well. This is really a collection of several explanations of the soul's origin, fall, and victory, ultimately, of the material world. Now, with that backdrop, let's go on to the etymology of the word authority. Now, right away, if you look at that word, it's broken up into two words, author and ity. Now, the ity part, you can think of different words that we use with, like, validity. So what's the difference between valid versus validity? It's taking on that same phrasing as it becomes a state of that word. So author becomes authority based on practice, based on behavior, versus author is a noun or state of being. Authority can also be a noun if you're looking at it in that sense. But the process of becoming authority in something is through practice. And so this is what the ity does. Valid becomes validity when it becomes a body of valid data. Author becomes an authority when it gets more than one set of experiences that lead to a body of authorship. So this is what we got. Now, the etymology of this word is different ideas about where it comes from, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce these right, French and different German or whatever, but I'll do my best. So I'll just spell it out. Authorita, T-E. Authority, prestige, right, permission, dignity, gravity. And now, see, there's nothing here about morality. Nothing here about what's right is, so there's two different kinds of right. There's a right about in a moralistic sense. Then there's right in the form of correctness. So this is what this is talking about. It's talking about someone who is respected because they tend to be accurate, or they have a history of experience in a certain topic matter or a certain area of expertise. So they become authority. We don't want to confuse this with authoritarian. They don't mean the same thing. Now, a lot of people have really just given all of their power over to others and let them become the author of their lives. And thus, that's why we begin to misunderstand the true meaning of this word. And we say, oh, they're authority figures. But in reality, the truest meaning of that word is someone that has prestige and dignity and gravity, because they're respected for being so correct, whatever they have authority about, right? It also gives the word authentic, could also possibly be another word. So author, authentic, all of these talk about being true to self, or being true to something, or being accurate or correct to something. So this is what we get. Let's go to these two words. Look at the modern day definitions of authoritative versus authoritarian and see they're very different, even though people confuse these two very often. So authoritative, able to be trusted as being accurate or true, reliable. That's all. That's all that means. It's nothing to do with someone has power over you or should have power over you. But modern world has made that into that word because that's what the demiurge does and the minions and all these people that want power and greed and lust. This is how they live their lives, and they go about to subjugate others because they use all their energy and their time and their money to make themselves fat and rich and greedy and sloppy and messy, right? That's what you get authoritative. Now there's a second one, commanding and self-confident, likely to be respected. Now it underlines obeyed, may or may not mean that, if it depends on how you look at it or how it's being used in a sentence. But we just saw the etymology of the word really had nothing to do with that. But in modern times, it's got to mean that. But even in the second meaning, it really is about someone that is confident in whatever it is they are authoring. They have experience with it, and they know they're reliable and they're accurate, and they just have that confidence. And thus, whatever they are bringing forth sounds commanding. So it's self-assured. So you can see here, there's nothing here about someone having power over you. So that's what you want to get in your mind, because this is why this book's called Authoritative Teaching. It's not talking about authoritarian or someone should have power over you. All right, now let's move to this authoritarian. You can see it's very different. Favoring or enforcing strict obedience to authority. And that's the key word because it's got author. This is actually comes from another word, but we're not going to get into that. But it's deriving from land, Aryan. Who had the right to call the shots? If I had land, you lived on it, I had the right to have power over you and tell you what to do. This is where slavery and, all that stuff comes into play. So when we join these two words together, then author becomes very different. Then I become not only am I the author, but now I have power over you because you live on my land. So that's where you get governorship and that's the whole idea. The most sacred form of property is the mind, according to the U.S. Constitution. So this is what they're doing. They're taking your property, your most sacred property. When we think about authoritarian, that's what's happening. So they're forcing on you, and they're going to use enforcement, strict obedience to this authority. So you see already these two words are extremely different. And again, even though they seem so similar, because it's been so misused, I would argue purposely so, confuse people and confound people. Well, you can see how it relates to the perfect mind and how Sophia provides allowance, much in the way the mother and father does, in terms of you have free will, practice whatever you will, because all the logos is set in motion already. You only need to go out and discover for yourself and learn the knowledge about that thing called good and evil. Not in a moralistic sense, but in a hermetical sense, in a knowledge, Gnostic sense, Gnosis sense, wisdom sense. Whereas authoritarian is more the Jehovah God, the demiurge God. No, you listen to what I say. I'll tell you what right and wrong is. Don't think for yourself. Remain in the dark, remain ignorant, and remain separated. There's the Tower of Babel. When you get prestige and knowledge, you can get to the skies, then I'm going to come down and confuse you and separate you. That's the demiurge. That's authoritarian. So that's what we got. So now with that, let's begin our read and commentary of this book. And remember, this is all within the context of listening to self, authoritative, versus listening to what's outside, which then becomes authoritarian. And that is not just about the right-hand path, but that's also a left-hand path, because it's the recklessness of the world that will also you'll give obedience to, because of your passions or because of your lack of discipline or whatever it happens to be. You just sort of run away because you need that now. You just imagine that I've got to have it or else. All right, now let's go on to this, and this is from the translation by George W. McRae. So again, much like many of the other texts before, much of this is going to be fragmentary. So when I use ... that's where it's fragmentary. And it starts out that way. ... in heaven ... within him ... anyone appears ... the hidden heavens ... appear, and before the invisible, ineffable worlds appeared. Now, what's being said here? Well, already you can see it's very Gnostic, because it's talking about ineffable worlds, right? And so it's going through the same process of it appears within, right? It's talking about within him. The heavens, they're within him, and they appear. The hidden heavens, they appear, and before the invisible, the ineffable worlds appear. So in other words, it's already telling you that there's a source from which everything is coming. So it continues from these, the invisible soul of righteousness came. Now, again, in Gnosticism, we don't look through a moralistic lens. So when we see that word righteous, we're not thinking about a set of laws that everybody has to follow, like little good sheep or little robots that just follow a command. But what we're thinking about is correctness, not in a moralistic sense, but in a value sense. How correct, how in alignment am I with that invisible soul? So these invisible soul of righteousness came. Again, stressing it's not moralistic, has nothing to do with that. It has to do with correctness. being a fellow member and a fellow body, a fellow spirit, meaning we are all part of this collective. Now, the soul again is compared to the feminine, where spiritual is often compared to the masculine. Rather, she is in the descent or is in the pleroma. So she's simultaneously in both, is what's being said here. She's both in the economic realm, which is where the descent is, and she's in the pleroma. She's not separated from them, but they see her, and she looks at them in the invisible world. So it's interesting because, again, this is hinting at the tripartite aspect of every one of us, including Sophia. How the spiritual self can look at self is so interesting, isn't it? We can not only simultaneously look outside, but we can look within ourselves. And this is the same thing here. So it's explaining that each of our souls came from the same source Sophia came from. And we came through her. We have that same ability. Secretly, her bridegroom fetched it. So the bridegroom, of course, being the Christ within, the gnosis, knowledge, is fetching the soul. Remember, again, it's a radar dish. So it's fetching the signals. He presented it to her mouth to make her eat it like food. And this is very reminiscent of the book of Philip, right? It talks about Christ transferred knowledge through her mouth. And he applied the word to her eyes as a medicine to make her see with her mind and perceive her kinsman and learn about her root, in order that she might cling to her branch from which she had first come forth, in order that she might receive what is hers and renounce matter. And so we're talking about the Christ that is visiting the Gnostic moments that each one of us have that help to sort of shake us from the slumber that we are in, this dark place that we're in, and then we get enfolded and we start to believe the material world is what's real. But if we pay attention long enough, we'll see that everything material is disappearing and coming back and disappearing. And so there has to be something behind it. That has to be what's real. ... He dwelt ... having ... sons. The sons ... truly, those who have come from his seed, called the sons of the woman, are brothers. In this very way, when the spiritual soul was cast into the body, it became a brother to lust and hatred and envy and a material soul. So therefore the body came from lust, and lust came from the material substance. For this reason, the soul became a brother to them. And what we learn from the exegesis on the soul, the reason why this came about is because Sophia became enamored with the messenger and disregarded the message. Now, we're talking about the Achamoth, the lower Sophia, that we all are. We're being enamored by the messenger. In other words, the savior outside. That's why these superhero movies are so popular. Everybody's looking for a superhero. Or why people are very inclined to be have the propensity to want authoritarian figures, because they don't want to do the work. They want to be lazy. They don't want to do anything, or they allow themselves to be caught up by lust or fear, or the right hand path of this church. You do what we say, or we ostracize you, kick you out, or we'll even kill you. Witch burnings, whatever it is, if you go in the Muslim world, or even a slow death, we'll just kill you, kick you out of the house, or where you don't have anywhere to eat, or nothing to eat, or you're out in the cold, or a slow degrading of emotional well-being, mental well-being, till you just sort of break down and you start to fall apart. So this is what this is talking about, where because we forget that we are the only ones can save ourselves, the Christ within, the hope of glory. That's why it says Christ is within, the hope of glory. That's why it says, why do you look there? Why do you look in the clouds? Lo, do you not know the Christ is within, the hope of glory? Don't you know that? Christ is within all of us. And that Christ within is the only hope of glory. Not someone on the outside. Not someone's going to come and save you on a white horse. And when you start believing that, you give all your power away, then you become as a prostitute. And this comes about because you begin to enamor the messenger rather than listening to the message within. You listen to what the messenger is telling you. You want them to tell you who you are. And you lust after that. You begin to lust after that messenger. As you hear a lot about how patients or clients that go to see therapists fall in love with them. And occasionally you'll hear about therapists took advantage of them, or teachers that take advantage of their students, because they fall in love with this authoritarian figure, because they look at them as a kind of power symbol, not recognizing this is coming from their own sense of powerlessness. So it's trying to fill a void by vicariously living through someone else. So therefore the body came from lust, you see. It all came from there. And lust came from the material substance. For this reason, the soul became a brother to them. And yet they are outsiders, without power to inherit from the male. So in other words, the male is the will. They have no will. Remember, the female shapes the will. but the male is the will. Think about these people who have given away their power. They have no will, so they have no male, right? They have no power, but they will inherit from their mother only. So in other words, this is when Sophia will visit on them. Form will only visit them. Evil will come upon them. And evil is not a moralist sense, like this is not a bad thing, but it's merely a dividing will occur. Destruction is going to have to visit them. That's what that is. Evil is just merely think of it as the catabolic versus the anabolic state. That's all it is. The mother, the feminine, is the anabolic state, and the male or the father is the catabolic state. One's catalyzing and the other's anabolizing. Whenever, therefore, the soul wishes to inherit along with the outsiders, for the possessions of the outsiders are proud possessions, pleasures of life, hateful envies, vainglorious things, nonsensical things, accusations, ... and her ... prostitution, he excludes her and puts her into the brothel. And that's what they do. Like, think about these corporations you give your power over, or maybe you voted for somebody to be your president. They're going to promise you all these things because there's someone out there you need to fear, and I'm going to save you from that fear. And then you vote for them, and then they don't keep any of their promises. And they ship you off to somewhere, some, I don't know, camp or some corporation, or maybe you lose your job. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be the opposite of what they promised you. They exclude you. He excludes her and puts her into the brothel. They just use you for ... debauchery for her. Really, they're just using you. You've become a prostitute, and you've been pimped out. She left modesty behind. It's not modesty as in, like, it's not comparing to this idea that, okay, sex is bad or something, but it's comparing this idea, everybody longs for a real partnership, a real love, monogamy, and all this is ultimately the highest form that most of us aspire toward. But this idea of just allowing anybody to have sex with us and we get money or we get something or breadcrumbs from it, this is what's being talked about here. That whole way of living is seedy, you see. It's because it diminishes self. We miss the mark of understanding, so we live in sin. Not in a moralistic sense, but in a way of misunderstanding, lack of gnosis, lack of knowledge of what's happening to us and what we're allowing to happen to us. Ignorance is another way of saying it. We lose that modesty, and then we become exposed. For death and life are set before everyone. Whichever these two they wish, then, they will choose for themselves. So again, it's just laying out the same thing the previous book laid out. The universe is out there for you. You can choose for yourself if you're going to move toward the things that promote health and well-being and life, or you can choose things that are going to lead to division, destruction, and death. So this is all it's talking about. Notice there's nothing here about you're going to go to hell, or no, it does have a kind of hell, but only in the you reap what you sow sense. That one then will fall into drinking much wine and debauchery. Because even if you go to church and it's really, really strict, almost invariably, every one of those people will fall into debauchery. Because there's no way to keep other people's set of laws. Because they're not right for you, you see? That's maybe right for them, or what that person thinks they're just projecting their own sense of failing onto you. So they have power over you, and they don't have to look at themselves. And you just fall prey to them, and you go into a drunken stupor. You drink their wine, and you become debaucherous, and you just follow after it, whether it be the intoxication of the lust of this world or the intoxication of the authoritarian figures that's going to promise you rescue and salvation, and I'm going to be your knight in shining armor. Therefore she does not remember her brothers and her father, for pleasure and sweet profits deceive her. She gets something out of this, right? It's not just that these people are using her. She's not actually innocent. She's not helpless. She may not understand why she's doing it. She may not understand the psychology behind it, but she's doing it because she's getting something out of it. In this case, it's pleasure, or maybe she gets money from it. Or, I get a home. I'm not really happy with this person I'm married with, but I stay because, he beats me or whatever, but hey, I get to go buy the latest purse. Now, this isn't just women. It uses that example, of course, but it's also men that do the same thing. The superhero movies, I'm going to draw superheroes. I'm going to go see all these superhero movies because that leader, I'm going to follow him because I have to have some kind of purpose in my life. I have to be part of some tribe. Otherwise, I have no purpose. Well, these are people that have been taught not to look within themselves, to find what their purpose is. And that's what leads to all of these very inclined, just sort of empty minds that are ready to be your soldiers, to go off to fight your wars and die and lose limbs. Having left knowledge behind, she fell into bestiality. Bestiality not meaning, obviously, with an animal here. It's, again, giving a parallel to, in the spiritual realm, that we're not lining up to our true nature, our true self, but we're having intercourse with things that are not true to us. So we fall into bestiality when we don't listen to the inner voice and we listen to either again, the right-hand path or the left-hand path, and not being able to see there is no right or left, that it's all the same thing. It's just catabolic and anabolic. That's all it is. Where a senseless person exists in bestiality, not knowing what is proper to say and what is proper not to say. Because you know why? Because they don't have a voice. They've given their voice away. They don't have anything to say except just parrot what they've been taught to say. But on the other hand, the gentle son inherits from his father with pleasure, while his father rejoices over him because he receives honor on account of him from everyone, as he looks again for the way to double the things that he has received. Now, received is a key word here because everybody's been given a gift. If you focus on cultivating that, it's going to grow several-fold. And people are going to, not everybody, but many people are going to be mesmerized. What do you have that I don't have? How are you able to accomplish that? And they'll find whatever you're doing to be inspiring. And many people will possibly even learn from you. You won't even have to say anything. You might be an example to them. You see, the Father rejoices in that. When you listen to your inner voice, He takes pleasure in that. And so it just says, for the outsiders, ... So we don't know what's been said here. So going on to the next paragraph, ... to mix with the ... For if a thought of lust enters into a virgin man, he has already become contaminated. So already right away, we can see it's implying there is no way not to be contaminated, because we have already entered into this realm. And by entering into this realm, we have already mixed with it. And that's what it's saying when it opened up with ... to mix with the ... Now, it's not clear exactly how it says that, but just the context of this and what follows suggests that's what it's talking about. And their gluttony cannot mix with moderation. For if the shaft is mixed with the wheat, it is not the shaft that is contaminated, but the wheat. See, that is what you have to understand. We don't focus on the wrong people are doing, but we focus on how can we help them to focus on the right. Now, when we talk about right, again, not in a moralist sense, but in a correct sense, in a way of alignment. We want to think about alignment. How can we help them to align to their voice? And when they're not aligning to their voice, it's not everybody else that's being contaminated. They're contaminating themselves. You see that? For since they are mixed with each other, no one will buy her wheat because it is contaminated. So no one's going to believe you. You have no authority. This is the whole purpose of this book, authoritative teaching. You have no authority. No one's going to respect you because you're not believable, because you don't even believe in yourself, and you're not consistent. You're not reliable. You say one thing, you end up doing something else. And people intuitively, instinctively pick that up about you. Mixed messages, because it is contaminated, but they will coax her. Give us the shaft. But people out there is going to be jealous and envious and lustful, and they're going to want to take that away from you, your voice. And they're going to, no, give us more of that broken self. Seeing the wheat mixed with it until they get it and throw it with all other chaff, and that chaff mixes with all other materials. And why would they want to do something like that? You've heard that saying, misery likes company? It gives them confidence that maybe the way I'm leading my life is really the right way, what the preacher said. Or if I'm married and I'm supposed to be monogamous and I'm sleeping with all these people, well, Joe down the road is doing it too, so it's okay. So this is what these people are doing. They're wanting company, so they want to bring you down too. So join us at the church with all these rules set on the gravestone. Interesting. It's stone versus a gravestone. Not much different here. Putting you to death in a sense. Letter of the law puts spirit to death. But a pure seed is kept in storehouses that are secure. And all these things then we have spoken. All right, so we're going to leave it there, but you can see already right away is establishing what is not the authoritative voice. It helps us to clarify then everything else then obviously must be the authoritative voice. And we're going to clarify that even further as we continue on the reading commentary of this book in our next video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, have a blessed day.